Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Warcraft video. Okay, today we've got a simple but important video. Shadowlands Alpha. What should you expect from it? When should you expect it? And in terms of changes, well, what do we think is going to happen, especially since BlizzCon and given everything that's happened with patch 8.3? There's a lot of interesting stuff to cover today, so let's just get right into it. So first up, where is the alpha test? What's going on? This is where things do get a little bit odd. So alpha is clearly later than usual. I mean, we're now into mid-March, and that means that if the testing period was faster than normal, let's just say 6 months of testing, I mean, we'd be looking at a mid to late September launch, I think at the earliest. At this point, I'd say that would actually be optimistic, and I am beginning to think that Shadowlands itself will be an October or November release. Now look, that's probably not what Blizzard want to have happen at all, but I do suspect that really at this stage, there's not that much else they can do. Of course, the big question for this, though, is why? What's going on? While we don't know, I think we can guess. Right, Shadowlands had the least informationally complete BlizzCon that a WoW expansion has ever had, in my opinion. Blizzard talked about very high-level ideas, but really not that much about specifics. I mean, even for Torghast, rather than show gameplay, they recreated it using PowerPoint. When it came to actual details for aspects of the expansion, there was often little concrete to be found. Now, in complete fairness to the devs, they were open about this. They did say that they were early into development and that a lot of things had not been locked in for the expansion. Now, Blizzard did receive a lot of positive feedback in aspects of Shadowlands, like things, say, the removal of the infinite AP farm. People love that. The unpruning, that's another great thing. And their approach to RNG with the chest at least seemed better, but they did also receive a lot of criticism, and that's important for us to consider post-BlizzCon. More hardcore players were very worried about Covenant abilities and soulbinds, and I agree with that criticism. For me, I just think that having the class design being tied into the Covenants is just more borrowed power, and it's essentially something that I think is unneeded for WoW. I mean, personally, I'd far rather choose a Covenant based on what I think is cool, and, you know, not what ability Blizzard happened to put on that Covenant. I mean, some of the Covenant abilities, they really are just different and powerful to the point where, in at least a lot of cases we've seen, people would feel pigeonholed. Now, the thing is, right, Blizzard seemed to stick by their guns after the con and during interviews, just in the same way they stuck by their guns on account-wide essences. Yet, what have we recently seen in, like, live World of Warcraft? Changes to account-wide essences. You know, them giving people more corrupted gear. I mean, hell, the entire saga of corrupted gear dominated 8.3. And looping it back to BlizzCon or post-BlizzCon, a part of me wonders if the team have actually been taking a second look at things that they once did have locked in, like those Covenant abilities, and maybe if that's a part of why this alpha has taken longer to hit us. I mean, the only really other explanation there is that they are just really behind schedule. And I wouldn't be surprised about that. I mean, if you looked at, say, the BlizzCon demo for Shadowlands, it pretty much was the 8.3 PTR, but in a new zone. Like, the level squish wasn't there, the unpruning wasn't there. So, yeah, be it a rough schedule or the team reevaluating core parts of what they showed at BlizzCon, I think it's clear the testing is coming a little bit late. I mean, if you go by the numbers, then as compared to past expansions, it certainly is late. Whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, we cannot tell right now. What I will say is this, though. Battle for Azeroth should not have released when it did. I mean, even Legion launched with loads of design problems, and it was a successful expansion. Blizzard keep on, though, releasing WoW expansions with loads of problems, only to then just play catch-up over the patches of that expansion's life. It keeps on happening to them. Now, that's always going to happen to a degree with a live game, but I've got to wonder if Blizzard are especially aware of that problem now. Personally, I think they actually know that Shadowlands will be the final straw for many people if they don't get it right, and I think they know that if it has a BFA-like launch, that they will be risking serious long-term damage to the health of the game. Look, ultimately, I would prefer a late beta test and a later than usual expansion if that means that it actually gives the developers the time they need. If that's the case, then good. I think WoW cannot be a live beta again, if you know what I mean. So with all that said, what should we actually expect from the alpha and beta? Well, we're going to kick it off with classes. Classes will be many people's first port of call once the alpha drops. Now, the most notable thing is going to be the unpruning that was announced at BlizzCon. Blizzard said that their goal is to bring more class fantasy to all of the specs through the reintroduction of some old lost abilities and the baselining of certain things across all specs. It actually sounds pretty good, and I think it will do wonders for the play experience of many classes, but I think mostly in niche scenarios where the expanded toolkit of a class can actually be used. I do suspect that second-to-second class gameplay, though, will be largely similar to Battle for Azeroth. I think what's going to matter here is how Blizzard move on from BFA in regards to classes once we lose the essences and the Azerite. Like, sure, they're not as vital as our artifacts were, but there still will be a hit for our characters when those things go. So hopefully Blizzard tighten up the pacing and reconsider maybe the GCD changes of BFA. But with classes, what's really going to matter is covenants. Will Blizzard have changed their plan? Now, when we last checked in on that, you got a class ability from each covenant, and then you could choose between a few different soulbind talent trees for that covenant, and then those trees also had socketable items in them called conduits. Now, that would suggest that most of the Shadowlands class progression will be via another borrowed power system. Now, that's the sort of thing that, to a degree, dominates the class design these days, but, you know, we've just yet to see what it's fully going to be like in terms of scope for Shadowlands. Personally, I just do think that the more class feel that we get via the baseline changes to classes, the better. I really hope they tone things down with the covenants. I think a part of me suspects, actually, that they've heard people's initial feedback on those covenants, and maybe will take some of it into account. At least I would implore them to do so. So overall here, I would not expect major changes to classes. We will not be getting Legion-like revamps again, okay? I think we're going to see the usual baselining of some things we've been used to in BFA, combined with a few new abilities coming in from, say, the next expansion systems. Overall, though, I think classes will be largely similar, but you'll just get more bits of flavor, and there will be mild improvements. That's at least what I'm expecting. Next up, though, something that really goes hand in hand with classes, and that is itemization. Itemization is probably the most important thing to get right in this alpha. After years of Titan forging and a final patch with corruption, I think there's little gameplay oriented that people actually care more about than itemization. And we literally have zero idea of what Blizzard are going to do. Zero. Right? The talk of the town at BlizzCon 2019 was that corrupted gear was a trial run for what Shadowlands would do. But, you know, not literally, more just in terms of the type of system of a thing that is on top of gear. Now, honestly, at this stage, if I was to place a bet, I'd actually bet that things have changed a bit. I reckon that Corruption's reaction was far more mixed than expected from Blizz, and that because of that, they'll probably be modifying their Shadowlands itemization plans. Regardless of what they go with, I think the testing, though, should reveal that rather quickly. We'll log in and find out. I mean, quest rewards could always Titan forge, so I imagine if they do a new system, we'll be able to find out a decent bit about it, even if it is just alpha with 1 or 2 zones open. Now, when I think about this thing a little bit more broadly, and just about the design of things like Corruption, I think it's clear with Corruption that Blizzard's main focus was on the creation of sets, and the mixing and the matching of effects, and the balancing of the negatives that came along with them. Like, I'll totally admit that there could be fun in mixing and matching the different corrupted bits, but it's just the acquisition that makes it suck. So hopefully that will be changed, and then I'd also say for Shadowlands, hopefully they just tone down the magnitude of that system in general. Then finally, while I'd love to say that I expect item level to mean more, I unfortunately doubt it will. Blizzard have said that's been their goal consistently for years upon years, and they've clearly never made an earnest attempt to actually make it so. Ian said that Corruption would do the same when he announced 8.3, but in reality, 8.3 had the worst, basically, the meaning of item level was the worst it ever has been, I think, in patch 8.3. So, as much as that might be Ian's intent, I just don't think that's something that the team are actually going to achieve when it comes to implementation. Okay, let's move away from the more technical stuff and talk about the world and the quests, and I think this is where Shadowlands could really shine. Actually, I kind of think it will exceed our expectations. See, Legion and BFA have had this big storytelling problem. The zones could be played in any order. Now, that meant that, at best, they could just be a series of short stories. Characters simply could not go through a long-term arc over multiple zones in the leveling experience because those zones had to be playable in any order whatsoever. Shadowlands changes that. Its zones are linear on your first character, with a single storyline taking you through all of those zones. Now, we've not had that since Warlords of Draenor, and Warlords gets a bad rap for good reasons. it's deeply flawed, but what it did have was excellent leveling and better than usual storytelling. And yes, I think they massively bungled that storytelling as the patches actually happened for that expansion, but, I think it was off to a good start. So I think that could be good for Shadowlands. I think the art team are also just always moving from strength to strength, so, that'll continue into our new zones. Then our zones will likely have a far better structured story, and because of that, I think we're actually going to be in for a real treat this time around. I think the feeling of, say, individual quests will probably be the same. I mean, it is just an MMO at the end of the day, but I think by having a better paced narrative, the Blizzard will be able to craft a far more compelling leveling experience. So that's definitely a good thing for Shadowlands, and that's what I'm expecting. Next up, a bit in leveling. So I've covered the new content of leveling and what to expect there, but what about the overall leveling experience? Well, I think that's going to be a challenge. I think the Blizzard's highest priority should be preventing a repeat of the Legion to BFA transition. I mean, it just felt terrible having all of your borrowed power from the Legion era being taken away, revealing just how bare your class actually was. Now, yes, resets happen with every expansion, but I think this time Blizzard must ensure that it's nowhere near as jarring. We're still going to see our ratings decrease. That will obviously happen. We're going to see our corruptions lose some of their power, I imagine, as well. The same goes for the Heart of Azeroth. But there is one thing that we do know confirmed is different, that you will now be getting something new in return for those losses. As you move through Shadowlands 4 new zones, you do get to use each Covenant's class ability. Now, I still think it will feel rough in terms of losing your ratings and your corruptions, but unlike with BFA, you will actually get some new stuff that matters as you level, and I think that's going to make a world of difference to how it actually feels to progress. Past that, I think we also need to just think about how number scaling and level scaling play out, just because Shadowlands is doing so much there. And I expect that basically it'll be okay, but there'll be the usual errors and just little problems smattered around the lower level content. Then actually just for leveling itself in terms of speed, I think it'll be a lot faster, but also a lot better paced because of Blizzard's overhaul of the expansion level brackets. I think faster leveling that just lets you really focus on fully getting an entire expansion's world and story basically sounds like a good thing to me and should be a better onboarding experience for new players. Okay, let's get back up to endgame. So Covenants really are the big question mark of Shadowlands. They had the most mixed BlizzCon feedback, really just from a wide range of players, and as I said, I personally suspect that this is what Blizzard will have been iterating on the most. Well, that and itemization. Now, I don't have a solid prediction here, but I dearly hope that Blizzard change their direction from BlizzCon. I hope that each Covenant grants you access to their power as a reward for completing their zone or something like that, and that you could just then swap between the 4 Covenant abilities at will, as if they were just a new row of talent choices for this expansion only. I think if Blizzard made that work, then the Covenant choice would be purely down to theme and fantasy. Now, past that, I do have some other concerns. So, conduits as a part of the Soulbind system, they seem like another offshoot of like the 7.3 Crucible, just at least in terms of being, gem-like relics that you're socketed in or destroyed when you replace them in a tree, and it just sounds like a real drag to me of a system, and yeah, I hope that Alpha reveals that significant iteration has taken place on that part of Covenants post-BlizzCon. Now, I will say this, the rest of Covenant seems great, having a big campaign, lots of character customization and unlockables. I think that's exactly what World of Warcraft needs. I just wish and I hope that in Alpha and Beta, we see them tone down the impact on gameplay and just put that impact, say, back into tier sets. I think that would be way better, and then the Covenants would be free just to play to their own strengths, which I think is player fantasy and being a good RPG. Now, just to roll off this video, let's talk about just some predictions and personal feelings. So, for classes, I think my number one thing that's in my head right now is Halinka the Unpruner. It sounds really cool, it's all fun to talk about, but will you actually be able to feel the unpruning? I mean, hey, you're a hunter, you get Eyes of the Beast back. Do you notice anything? No, you don't. So I think that's going to be a very interesting situation. But there are some things like, I think it's Hammer of Wrath, isn't it, that's baseline now, so what will that talent be? There's potential there for, I think, small but impactful changes, but certainly what I would want to be seeing is just a little bit more complexity on a few classes and just a tightening up of the pace on a few classes. I think for me that mostly comes via the GCD. To me, really, that feeling of just hitting both your buttons at the same time and then going straight into a super powerful attack, I think that's really fun and breaks up the pacing of gameplay. And I think that certainly using your offensive cooldowns and just them invoking the GCD, I don't think that feels as good. So I really hope that's something that Blizzard changes, because really, if they revert the GCD change and then they go with an unpruning, I don't think they need to do a massive amount of class changes to have the game feeling, I think, a good bit better. Then I guess there's Torghast. I mean, a part of this is just wondering what the hell is it, because I've not really covered it in this video, because right now we just don't know that much. I'll say this from a personal perspective. I really love Horrific Visions. You've heard me say that a lot, and that actually does fill me with hope for the power of Torghast as a fun gameplay system. However, if I think about Horrific Visions, I mean, they can be a drag because of the other things that are associated with them, right? The progression and the limited access and all of those things. So that does worry me about Torghast, but what I will say is that Blizzard seem to have known what things to shore up in their hotfixes to Horrific Visions, so maybe that will bode well for Torghast. But overall, I think Torghast could be one of the best parts of this expansion if they handle it right, and they don't just sort of suck the oxygen out of it. And I'm a little bit worried they could systematize it so much that basically the fun is ruined. So I hope they don't do that. If they don't do that, I think it could be great. And certainly when it comes to alpha and the things that I want to really be testing, I think Torghast is like number one. I think it's something that players won't really care about when they're watching YouTube videos though, but in terms of play experience, I think Torghast has a lot of potential and will be extremely important. But I mean, hey, if you think about it like this, right? So imagine the leveling is really good, as I expect it to be. Imagine the Covenants are toned down and the Torghast is really good, and we just have a solid amount of content. I actually think that could be pretty darn good. Basically, as long as they don't mess it up. And that's why with, say, itemization, I'm just waiting with bated breath, because I think if we get another convoluted, game-defining system that's bigger than it needs to be, then it seriously will damage the game. Overall, do you know what I really want? I just want less random stuff, less just messing around with things that feel like they're trying to inflate gameplay, and just more of a focus on content. And when you look at other MMOs on the market, you know, that content focus does seem to work. And I think that with World of Warcraft, Blizzard, you know, it's what I've said before, they've been trying so hard to sweeten the carrot and to improve the stick that they've forgotten that there's more than just the carrot and the stick. There's the actual game world. I think Shadowlands is a great opportunity for them to get a lot of those things right. Certainly, if I think about, say, Mythic plus Dungeons, there's been a lot of criticism of those during the BFA expansion. Perhaps we will see a better state of affairs when we move over to Shadowlands. That's like another thing I'll be looking for, you know, in the alpha. But yeah, I think for overall for me, World of Warcraft can survive having a few problems, right? Look at Legion. I had so many issues with Legion at launch, just in terms of some, like its fundamental design, but it got the gameplay right, and it had a bunch of content, and I think that meant that a lot of people were like, yeah, there's some annoying systems, but hey, there's also plenty of game I can go and enjoy. Look at Final Fantasy XIV, an extremely successful MMO, one that really, by all accounts, is just growing at this stage. And that's a game that is clunky as hell. Sometimes it feels like it's been designed by just, you know, people who just completely don't really see like the traditional MMO trappings or action RPG trappings, right? It can be really confusing sometimes. But do you know what it does have? It's got a lot of content, it's got a lot of really good features, a lot of really good classes, and that's meant that just the core bread and butter of what that game should be has been really, really well catered to. And for me, I just wish that Blizzard would focus more on that. And really, when we're going through the Shadowlands Alpha, that's going to be my focus. Now, there is one final thing. This is a video. I mean, this is a broad video, but it's just about my alpha thoughts, expectations, dates, and things like that. Another thing that could be, be delaying this is that which we cannot name on this platform that's obviously having a major impact on just about all of us. I mean, even in our workplace, I'm basically the only person in the office. Nikki's here as well. Everyone else is at home. We're, working on our measures, let's just say. Now, a company like Blizzard will be able to establish a work from home policy, yes, but that's going to take time, right? I imagine there's a lot of data security concerns. I imagine there's a lot of logistics concerns. Those things absolutely could lead to a delay in the alpha, and it's absolutely not one that we can really blame Blizzard for. Ultimately, the overall scope of things on our planet right now is very disruptive to life and business. And yes, this is just our little corner of the internet. It's just talking about World of Warcraft, but yeah, I think it would be naive to expect zero disruptions there. Now, for my part, you know, if a lot of us are going to be spending more time at home, I want to make as much content to help keep you not bored as I can. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if there's other things you would like to hear about as well. So that's it for us. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you are looking forward to in Shadowlands and what you think Blizzard may have changed, or just, you know, what do you think that delay could actually be about? Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.